They say regret doesn't crash into you the moment you cross a line. It waits. It settles somewhere quiet, patient, almost polite. And then one day, when the noise fades and you're finally alone with yourself, it speaks. For me, it started with something so ordinary that I didn't recognize it as a turning point. Just a towel, a bathroom door, and a moment I never imagined would follow me for years. Before I go any further, let me say this. What unfolds next isn't scandal, and it isn't fantasy. It's about restraint slipping softly, about a boundary that didn't shatter, it thinned. So stay with me until the end. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and don't look away. Because stories like this don't shout, they whisper. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind that passes without leaving fingerprints. My partner, Daniel, was out of town for a conference and the apartment felt larger than it should have. Silence has a way of expanding when someone you're used to isn't there. I came home late, dropped my bag near the door, and headed for the kitchen. That's when I heard the water upstairs. Steady, rhythmic, the guest bathroom. I remembered then that Evan, the graduate student renting our spare room, had mentioned he'd be back early from campus. He was quiet, polite, almost overly considerate. One of those people who tries very hard not to take up space. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed something odd. The bathroom door wasn't fully closed. Steam drifted into the hallway, softening the edges of everything. I stopped, not because something felt wrong, but because something felt unfamiliar. Every reasonable thought told me to turn back. Instead, I cleared my throat lightly and knocked. "Hey," I said. "I think you left a towel in the dryer." The door opened just a few inches. Evan stood there wrapped securely, eyes startled, not exposed, not inappropriate, just caught off guard. "Oh, I didn't know you were home," he said. Embarrassed but composed, I handed him the folded towel, careful to keep my gaze respectful. But something in his posture made me pause. He looked unsettled. "Are you okay?" I asked, meaning it genuinely. There was a moment, just one, where he could have said yes and closed the door. He didn't. "I'm fine," he said slowly. Then after a breath, "Actually, could I ask you something just for a minute?" I hesitated. This is where people rewrite their own history, pretending they didn't feel the shift. I felt it. I stepped inside anyway, leaving the door open. We stood on opposite sides of the small bathroom, steam fading, the moment oddly fragile. He spoke quietly, words tumbling over each other. "I've been feeling disconnected from myself, from people. I don't know if it's stress or just growing up wrong." I nodded, leaning against the counter, keeping space between us. Sometimes being an adult means pretending you have answers when you're still guessing, too. "I think everyone feels like that at some point," I said. "It doesn't mean anything is broken." He looked relieved. Not fixed, just seen. And this is the part that's hard to explain without sounding dramatic. Nothing happened, no touch, no confession, just a silence that stretched longer than expected. I noticed the sound of my own breathing, the way his eyes lifted, then dropped again. The awareness that two people can stand close without crossing a single visible line and still feel changed. I remember thinking this is dangerous, not because it's wrong, but because it feels easy. After a few minutes, he thanked me sincerely and I left. That night, I didn't sleep, not from guilt, but from realization. Some moments don't hurt because of what they contain. They hurt because of what they almost become. Over the next few days, Evan was distant, polite, careful, respectful, but different. So was I. Then one evening, while Daniel watched television downstairs, Evan lingered in the kitchen. Not close, not far. "I've been thinking about that conversation," he said, "about how calm you were." I nodded. Sometimes listening is all anyone needs. He looked at me then, not romantically, not boldly, but with honesty. "I don't know what I'm feeling," he admitted. "I just know what mattered." That was the moment I chose restraint. Some feelings, I said gently, are meant to be acknowledged, not acted on. He understood, and maybe that's what made it harder. Later that night, I sat alone at the table, tea untouched, clock ticking. Time doesn't judge. It just records. I realized then that not every story of regret comes from doing something. Some come from realizing how close you came and what it revealed about you. That night, I stayed seated long after the apartment went quiet. The television downstairs hummed faintly, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times before. Yet now it felt distant, almost unreal. I wrapped my hands around the mug, more for grounding than warmth, and tried to slow my thoughts. They didn't listen. It surprised me how little the moment itself replayed in my mind. What lingered instead was the version of myself had uncovered. Attentive, open, dangerously understanding. I'd always believed I knew my limits. Turns out limits don't announce themselves. They show up disguised as kindness, patience, and quiet conversations that last a little too long. In the days that followed, nothing dramatic happened. No confrontations, no confessions, just small adjustments. Evan spoke less. I chose my words more carefully. Doors closed more deliberately. Space once invisible became intentional. And yet the air carried something unspoken. Not desire. Awareness. The kind that sharpens every glance, every pause in conversation. I noticed how easily people build stories in their heads without meaning to, how quickly connection can deepen when two people feel seen at the same time. I caught myself wondering how many moments like this exist between people every day. Moments that never make it into stories because nothing happened, no line crossed, no secret exposed, just an internal shift no one else could measure. One evening, as I passed the hallway mirror, I stopped and really looked at myself. Not critically, honestly. I didn't see guilt there. I saw responsibility. The understanding that being trusted is not the same as being invited. That care, when left unchecked, can quietly become something heavier. Life returned to its rhythm. Laughter came back. So did routine. But something inside me stayed altered, calmer, maybe wiser, more aware of how fragile boundaries can be when loneliness and empathy meet in the same room. Some nights I still think about that pause, that breath where everything could have gone differently. And I'm grateful it didn't. Not because it would have been catastrophic, but because it would have been irreversible. Some moments don't change your life outwardly. They just leave you knowing yourself a little more than you did before. And once you know that part of yourself, you can't unknow it. It stays with you in quiet choices, in the way you step back instead of leaning in the way you listen without offering more than you should. I learned that restraint isn't about fear. It's about respect for others and for the person you want to remain when the moment passes. To you, my beautiful viewers, if you ever offered someone understanding, believing they'd never take more, what would you feel the moment you realized they did? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched something quiet inside you, share it with someone who understands subtle moments. And subscribe with the bell on because the next story might be the one that lingers with you the longest.